The NRA likes to say that guns don't kill people, people kill people. Okay, so let's start with people then. Why do people own guns? A few reasons. For protection, for sport, for hunting, for work, which is security and law enforcement purposes, for criminal activity. Protection is actually the #1 reason. It's #1 by a lot, in fact. 67% of gun owners say the major reason for owning their gun is protection. 1 in about every 3 households holds a gun. So if you're looking at the average street in America, this many are armed. And most of them keep the gun not because they're gun nuts, as the left sometimes likes to call them. More likely they're family nuts. Nuts who like to protect themselves and their family, which isn't a nutty thing at all. If you ask one of these gun owners why they bought their gun, you'll get some pretty consistent answers. Fear of crime, fear of personal harm, injury, rape. It's easy to belittle the idea of owning something so powerful, but there's a powerful case to be made that these fears are real. Crime does happen. Personal harm, injury, rape. It's true, these aren't impossible events. But here's the thing. Actually, 2 things. There's a lot, and I mean a lot, less crime than there used to be. Even just 15 or 20 years ago. And #2, guns actually really suck at protecting you. And by really suck, I don't mean that they only work a little bit. I mean they work backwards. They actually have been scientifically proven to make your home more dangerous, not less dangerous. These 2 facts are super exciting, actually, because if we can convince people who own guns for protection to either A, not have a need to be protected, or B, use something better for protection, we could potentially eliminate the majority of the guns out there. Just gone. With fewer guns and fewer people having access to these lethal weapons, we'd see fewer gun deaths, we'd see fewer mass shootings, fewer murders, and, importantly, fewer suicides. So let's take a look at these things and see what's possible. First, here's why there's less to fear today than you probably think. This isn't a drawing of a roller coaster. This is the US violent crime rate. That's violent crime. Here's property crime. And here's crime overall, which includes everything in between. On almost every measure, this country is way safer than it's been in decades. In fact, there's a greater chance of you getting struck by lightning at some point in your lifetime than of you being murdered in the next year. And you're twice as likely to die in a car accident than at the hands of another. And twice as likely to die of falling. Get the idea? Crime isn't as scary as it used to be. And you should be less afraid of crime than a whole list of other deadly things. Like staircases. Yeah, forget about open carrying a gun holstered to your hip. You'd be safer if you open carried a helmet strapped to your head for going up and down stairs. Just as a little aside, it's worth considering how many lives are saved by elevators every year. Elevators are way more effective at protecting lives than guns ever will be. Of course, elevators and guns are protecting you from different dangers. One against falling down stairs, which, remember, is statistically the greater danger, and one against crime, which, remember, guns don't do a good job of protecting you from. But when the sun goes down and the house is darkened, when you're lying in bed and the only sound is the sound of your own breathing, it doesn't matter what the crime rate is. It doesn't matter that the staircase 20 feet away is a greater threat. You worry. What if? You wonder, am I ready? To keep worry from filling that silence, I fill the room with music. Every night, music. My dad kept a baseball bat under his bed. He was 6 foot 8 inches tall, with arms of steel, but the bat was there, just in case. Others lock the door to their room or sleep with the TV on. And some, well, more than some, we know the number, 75 million Americans sleep with a gun at home, loaded in a drawer or locked on an upper shelf. It waits in the dark. In fact, 38% of all the gun owners out there say that there's a gun that's loaded and easily accessible to them at all times when they're at home, even when they're sleeping, ready to be snatched at the sound of a broken window or the slam of a car door, ready to be fired at a shout in the night or the pitched note of a scream, ready for anything. A protection against fear and harm, the promise of a good night's sleep. But let's play through this scenario a bit to see just how effective a gun is at protecting you and your family. First, it's not likely that you'll actually have a home invasion. It's far more likely that the gun sitting in your drawer never gets fired. Not once, not ever. But on the road of likeliness, there are a few more steps before we get to that firing for protection image, that image that you have in your head when you bought the gun, that you would fire this at somebody if they broke into your home. If the gun is in your drawer, loaded, or even in a locked safe, it's likely that the next time it fires will be at you. By you. It's a depressing thought, I know, but an all too common one. It's estimated that 11 to 16% of people contemplate suicide, seriously contemplate it, at some point in their lifetime. About 5% of the general population actually attempt it. Most of those attempts do not result in a death. Just 1 out of every 25 attempts kills. But if a gun is close by, it's far more likely that the attempt becomes an actual death. This is a big deal because most people who attempt a suicide but don't complete it never go on to try again. If you attempt with something that's less lethal than a firearm, you'll have another chance at life. Not so for guns. This isn't a small thing. Guns kill the person holding the gun far more than they kill the person on the other side of it. So the next time you see a handgun, consider that if they were designed based on who they actually hurt, this design, this image of a gun with the barrel facing towards the holder, this would be what they looked like. But then, if they did look like this, maybe no one would buy them. So, probably the gun will never be fired, and the next likely firing in violence is to kill you. But a little further down the road of likeliness, and we reach another possibility. That when moving the gun, you shoot yourself in the foot. Here's a YouTube video of someone shooting themselves in the foot. And here's another. Shooting yourself in the foot, which, remember, is an accident, happens all the time. It happens more than everything you were afraid of when you bought your gun. Home invasion is the greatest fear, but therein lies the greatest fallacy of guns as protection. Because most of the time, you actually won't be home when your home is invaded. A study by the sociologist Thomas Repetto asked 97 convicted burglars how they targeted homes for invasion. The answer? Every single one of them said their primary concern was finding homes that were unoccupied. A gun is no protection in an unoccupied home. In fact, a gun is just one more target of a home invasion. Yes, guns themselves are stolen by burglars, far more than they're fired at them. And why wouldn't they be? Guns are expensive and positively perfect for the black market. The Bureau of Justice Statistics estimates that about 172,000 guns are stolen during household burglaries every year. 172,000! That's enough guns fired all at once to win the Battle of Gettysburg. But no battle was ever won in absentia, nor any territory defended, not even the home. Consider, though, another possibility. If the gun is meant to protect your family, what happens when your family is home, but you're not? If an intruder breaks in, what happens when literally you and your gun, your great protection, aren't there to protect? Those are some pretty giant holes in the guns for protection of home and hearth theory. But let's follow this branching tree of possibilities a few branches down. If you actually are home when an intruder breaks in the middle of the night, guess what? You're sleeping. Think back. Think about security guards you've seen at banks and airports. Security guards at clubs and concerts, at schools and courthouses, at Disneyland. Nobody lets security guards sleep on the job. Because no matter how armed they are, sleeping arms are unarmed arms. In fact, answer me this. Would you rather have a security guard unarmed who's awake, or one who is armed but is sleeping? It's not even a contest. The awake guard can call for help. He can close the safe. He can throw shoes at the attacker. And in the final analysis, shoes are a more effective weapon than sleep. But let's pretend for a moment that you do wake up, that you hear a window breaking in the kitchen or the living room, you're not sure which. You wake up and you hear an intruder. What do? Reach for the gun in the drawer, if it is in the drawer. Do you climb the shelf in your closet and fumble for the safe? Or do you reach for your phone and dial 911? Do you turn on the light, hand gripped around the cold handle, shaking, and feel your way into the hallway? Do you shout into the dark of the house, shrieking that you have a gun? Do you rush into the rooms of your children and lock the doors behind you? Do you fire off a warning shot and stand in the echo of that shot as the room pulses with the burn of gunpowder? Where's the hole in the wall from the bullet? Or did you shoot the wall? Or the ceiling? Someone is crying. Are they afraid? Or were they shot? Can you hear the intruder over the cries? Have they gone? You curse and whisper shouts to be quiet so you can hear. Nothing. And far off, sirens. There's a knock at the door. You're safe. Did the gun give you the courage to run to your loved one's room? Or would you have done that anyway? Did firing a warning shot scare the intruder? Or would your shouts have been enough? Did the time it took to take the gun from the drawer slow your call to 911? Did it delay that call? What would have happened if the intruder was actually in your room? Could you have made it to your gun in time? Would you have pulled the trigger, even if you couldn't see clearly? Would your aim be good enough for a moving target? A moving target in the dark? What if the person in the room was a loved one, afraid? Could you have made a mistake? Could you have shot the wrong person? In the chaos of the moment, with adrenaline coursing through your veins, how could you know? How could you be sure of anything? Was it a broken window in the kitchen or the living room? Was it a window that broke, or a glass of water tipped over by the cat? Was it an intruder at all? When you prime your mind for a heroic confrontation with a gun, you're ready to leap into action at the slightest suggestion of a sound. The most dangerous person then in that situation, the greatest threat to you and your family, literally, in more cases than not, isn't an intruder, it's you. Does the gun make you ready for anything, or does it make everything a ready chance for accident, for violence? You know, I lied a bit. I skipped ahead a bit on that road of likeliness, because there's one thing that's more likely than the unlikely chance of you using your gun against an intruder, and that's you using your gun on accident against a family member, or a family member using your gun on accident. The New York Times just the other year reported on 1 week in April when 4 toddlers died by guns at their own hand. It's heartbreaking, but the sad thing is it happens all too often. About 500 people die every year from accidental gunshot wounds. That's more than in mass shootings. It's 8 times more people, actually. Guns left unattended, guns thought to be unloaded, guns that looked like toy guns, felt like toy guns, but fired for real. The danger of guns makes your home more dangerous, not less. Guns that were purchased to protect the family are ready weapons to be turned against the family. If you look at the statistics, well, here they are. Look at these statistics. This one here is the number of gun violence victims. It's a chart from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Almost all men, right? But many of the women on that list, that's domestic violence. Arguments elevated to the point of violence. In fact, when you look at non-fatal firearm violence by sex, you see it borne out. While victimization for men continues its decline, for women, it's spiking upwards. So we've seen a few things here. A few possible ways that make the possibility of violence against your family more likely rather than less likely. Guns that aren't protecting your family when you're out. Guns that might not be effective against an intruder. Guns that can accidentally shoot and kill. Guns that can be fired on purpose in suicide attempts. And even guns that can be used on purpose against others, even others in the family. Oh, and guns at home kept for any reason can be taken from the home for other reasons by family members. All too often we learn that mass shooters took the guns of a father, a mother, an uncle, a friend, a grandparent, and used them to kill others. Want to prevent mass shootings? One way is to prevent guns from falling into the hands of family members. And the best way to do that is to prevent guns from being at home in the first place. Why keep guns at home then? For protection? Here's all of those possibilities of gun ownership, the ones that I just discussed, in one view. This here shows the likely outcome of owning guns in your lifetime. The most likely outcome of a lifetime of gun ownership for protection is that the gun is fired at least once with no ill effects over the course of 56 years. But there's only a 76% chance of that. There's also a 5% chance that the gun is never fired. But these other possibilities, these terrible possibilities, are far more possible than you might expect. Each time someone decides to go from being a non-gun owner to being a gun owner, it's a flick of this board. So there's a 5% chance that your gun ownership ends in some form of violence. An accident, a suicide, a homicide, and just a 4% chance that it's used in some form of self-defense. So empirically, the safest option really is not to have a gun at all. Again, people who own guns are far more likely to use it against themselves than to use it against another. That makes so many of these terrible things, the 20,000 gun suicides, the 10,000 gun homicides every single year, preventable by not buying the gun. What's the best gun for protecting your family? No gun. That's right. If you're thinking about buying a gun for protection, the best thing you could do to protect your family is not to buy the gun. But people are still afraid. People still want to protect themselves and their family. I get it, I understand. Well, the good news is there are tons of ways to do that, and to do it well. Not backwards, not poorly, but well. Here's how we reduce gun deaths by suicide, domestic violence, and accident. We outcompete guns for protection and home safety. We make a better case. We sell a better product. 1 in every 286 guns sold will result in a gun injury or death within 10 years of ownership. Surely there are better, more effective alternatives. Here they are. Home security is like hiring a team of unarmed security guards to stand sentry over your home. Outside or inside or both, at every window and door, with sensors and cameras, with locks that auto-lock if you forget, and speakers that respond if you're not at home. It keeps watch. A security system doesn't accidentally shoot you in the foot. It doesn't shoot a hole in the wall or a shot that could ricochet into a child. It doesn't have to fire a warning shot. Its sirens are disruptive and unmistakable. And unlike you, it doesn't fall asleep, ever. It isn't confused what the sound was in the living room. It doesn't have bad dreams or become suicidal. It stays alert. It knows the difference between the cat knocking over a glass of water and the glass breaking in the window above the sink. It wakes you when there's trouble. It calls the authorities when you're away. And it's there, 24/7, ready for anything. Security systems have proven their effectiveness. In fact, a security system doesn't just help you after a break-in. It's been proven to help stop intruders before they break in. Criminals who see a security system are more likely to turn away than to turn towards a home. A study of 3,000 households by the researchers Rengert and Wallace-Chick showed that a security system was one of the few signaling mechanisms that actually deterred crime. And quite a bit of it. The chance that a residence is burgled is nearly 3 times greater for homes that don't have a security system than for those that do, according to a study by Hakim and Burke in 1991. In a study in 1994 by Wright and Decker that spoke with burglars directly, literally talked to them, 3 out of 4 of the criminals were deterred by the presence of an alarm at least sometime in the course of choosing and entering a target. 3 out of 4. And the other security precautions, deadbolt locks, a dog, exterior lights, pins in window frames, and bars on the windows, those have been found to be significantly less effective than alarms at turning around burglars. But at least they have some level of effectiveness. A gun, on the other hand, having a gun in the household? No. Gun ownership, no matter how intimidating, simply had no bearing on whether an intruder selected a home as a target. In fact, since more than twice as many guns are stolen than used in self-defense, the presence of a gun could increase an intruder's interest in a home, rather than decrease it. That means when it comes to home security, a gun is good for only one thing: fighting an intruder who is already inside your house. If you're home, if you're awake, and if you're a good shot. Wouldn't you rather scare the intruder away before they're inside? No matter if you're home or not, security systems do that, guns don't. But home security is even more powerful than that. Here's a street of houses. So, let's say a home security system is so effective it stops a criminal from breaking in to this house. But if a criminal is walking down the street, sees the security system here, well, maybe he targets the house next door, right? Turns out that one has a security system too. Okay, and the one on the other side of the house does as well. But the one across the street, this one, the house across the street, this house doesn't have a security system. You'd think the intruder would target this one, right? I mean, a burglar is a burglar. He's gonna burgle something somewhere. If not the one with the security system, then the one without it. It's a perfectly legitimate assumption that security systems don't reduce crime, they don't bring it down, they just displace it, shielding homes that have them and pushing crime onto those that don't. But that's not how it works. A massive study that analyzed police department, alarm permit, and census data on every single residence in Newark, New Jersey showed that there's absolutely no displacement of crime. Instead, the existence of a security system in this house means that this home, this one, without the security system, this is actually safer too. It's less likely to be targeted than if nobody on this block had security systems at all. And here's what it said. Here's what that study quoted. It said, quote, "It is conclusive that there is not only a statistically significant relationship and causal relationship between the increase of residential burglar alarms and the decrease of residential burglaries, but also a geographic diffusion of benefits. The houses with residential burglar alarms installed are less victimized and better protected than the houses without burglar alarms. Houses located next to a house with a burglar alarm installed are also less likely to be victimized and are better protected." Now, that's pretty amazing. It means that security systems don't just help you, they help your community. They serve as a powerful shield, wider than the home they're shielding. They reduce crime rather than displacing it. And they're good at it. Damn good. Security is a $25 billion business each year in the US alone. That's about twice as big as the guns and ammunition industry. And for good reason. It works. That's why every company, every business, one of the first things they do is install a security system. Security systems first, not guns. Just think how crazy it would be for a company's security plan to be, hey, let's hand out guns to all of the office staff. They'll protect us and our property. What could go wrong? Of course, plenty could go wrong. It would be absurd. A gun under every desk? You don't want guns distributed like staplers and copy paper. You don't want your office workers packing heat. Maybe some of them would handle it fine, sure. But come on, everyone? Without any training at all, just hand out guns to everyone. Because remember, there's no training requirement to purchase a gun. No training requirement to keep it at home. Just think how many more workplace shootings there'd be. How you'd be on the edge of your seat the moment you arrived in the morning. The second anyone raised their voice, or merely an objection in a meeting. It wouldn't make sense for security reasons either. What happens at night when nobody's at the office? The security would just disappear. And yet, the same logical arguments that would stop you if you are a manager of a company, the same arguments that would stop you from handing out guns to your office staff are the ones that should keep you from keeping one in your own home. It's not an effective security strategy. It's a dangerous weapon that can be mishandled or misfired. And what happens when nobody's home? The security would just disappear. Businesses know better. They know the numbers. They read the studies. Businesses have security systems built in because they know a system is better than a gun under every desk. Businesses have more at stake than the average homeowner. Where homeowners have thousands of dollars on the line, businesses have millions, sometimes billions. And they have to protect employees and shoppers and clients and business partners. They have to protect their reputations. So they take security seriously. They follow known best practices. They attend industry conferences and talk about ways to be better, about what might work better. So what do? Well, let's look at their security playbook. First of all, they do security systems first and always. Then they go to unarmed guards. Then they go to armed ones, and only if they're trained. Trained and armed security often comes in the form not of private firms, but of police. So security systems are the first choice. But what about that last choice? I mean, if police are armed, why shouldn't you arm yourself and your home with a gun? Like, let's say you have a security system. Why not take it one step further, right? Well, even police don't have the best training when it comes to firearm use, as we've seen in officer-involved shooting after officer-involved shooting. The euphemism says it all. Officers were involved, but did they pull the trigger? Did they mean to pull the trigger? Should they have? Police forces across the world are trying to find ways to make that question moot, to mute the sound of gunfire, to diffuse dangerous situations without guns altogether. Why? Because guns are blunt weapons. They're more like grenades than precision instruments for disarming threats and restoring order. Yes, sometimes it's necessary to incapacitate someone, a dangerous person, who's a danger to themselves and others, but rarely is the goal to execute that person on the spot. If you could, you'd put them to sleep, or pick them out of the moment and into some other space where no one could be hurt. We don't have the power of magic yet, but we have more than just the power of gunpowder, and police are turning to these powers more and more. Here's one, the taser. Here's another, the nightstick, and another, mace guns, and another, flash grenades. This one's experimental, super bright lights to blind the intruder. This one's too, beams of sound. Some are better than others, but many actually work better than a gun. Let's take a look at what might happen if, rather than having a gun, the average homeowner packed one of these less lethal, more effective weapons. Let's look at two scenarios, both assuming you have no security system beyond the weapon. So here's scenario number one. You're home, it's night, you're sleeping in bed, and you hear something. You think an intruder has broken in. You see a figure moving in the dark. You throw open your locked cabinet beside your bed, and you reach for your gun. Now, we went through this before. You reach for your gun, you fire off a shot at the shadowy figure. Now, if it's a real intruder, you have to shoot them in the chest or the head to truly incapacitate them. Are you that good of a shot to hit the shadow in the dark? Are you that ready to end a life? Because that's what you'd be doing. You'd be potentially ending a life. You hit them in the arm or just graze them, will they retreat or will they lunge towards you? Even if you do hit them, most gunshots don't take a person down instantly. If they have a weapon, this person, this intruder, they'll still be able to use it against you, even in pain. Maybe they're more likely to use it if provoked with a shot. Your trouble doesn't end with the firing of a gun, of course. It may be just the beginning. If it's not a real intruder, If it's a family member, you may have made a life-altering mistake. Are you prepared to fire into a shadow without a name or a face? In the middle of your room, in the middle of the night? Are you ready to take that gamble? So that's the gun scenario, but let's try this again. You're home at night, sleeping in bed, and you hear something. You think an intruder has broken in. There's a figure moving in the dark. You throw open the locked cabinet beside you, and you reach for your taser. Now, this is a taser. It looks like a gun. It is a gun in many ways, but rather than shooting a bullet that tears through flesh, it shoots out two little probes, sharp metallic darts at 180 miles an hour, fast enough to cut through clothes and pierce the skin, but not fast enough to do lasting damage. Now, these are darts. It shoots darts on a thin wire. The wire unspools from the gun, and when the darts hit their target, you send 50,000 volts of electricity into the attacker. The electricity runs through the body, finding the nerves that control the intruder's motor and sensory functions. These nerves tell the muscles in the body to contract, and that's what they do. The intruder falls to the ground. They can't do anything but fall to the ground. There's no powering through it, no fighting through it. There's literally nothing else they can do to fight it off. The taser's essentially taking control of their body, and they're left helpless. Now, if it's a real intruder, you don't have to have perfect aim. You don't have to shoot them in the chest or the head to incapacitate them. Any contact, whether in the leg or the hand, will succeed in taking them down. And they will be taken down at the first pulse of electricity. Any weapon they have will fall to the ground with them. So you'll be able to disarm them, to get past them, to get to the rest of your family, to call the police to find safety. And even if you miss when you fire at the target, you can use the taser, the part that you're holding, you can use that as a handheld high voltage stun gun to incapacitate them. Tasers are so effective that they've been proven to reduce the chance of bodily harm to police when police use them in an altercation by as much as 80%. In fact, the mere presence of a taser can prevent confrontations. In their deployment among police in New Zealand, officers found that for every 6 times a taser was presented, it was discharged only once. And a taser doesn't kill, so there's no need to hesitate or worry about lifelong moral soul-searching, or the bloody mess that guns make of your home and your life. What if it's not a real intruder? If it's a family member instead? Well, there's no life-altering mistake to worry about. Tasers do hurt somewhat, but their effectiveness does not rely on pain to be effective. In fact, most of the injuries from taser strikes are not from the darts or from the electricity, but from the person falling down when they hit the ground. In a study conducted by Wake Forest University's School of Medicine, tasers resulted in just 2 injuries per 1,000 exposures. Just 2 out of 1,000. Now compare that to 500 injuries and 500 deaths per 1,000 exposures of firearms. A taser misfired or fired at the wrong person will not kill. A taser misfired will not leave a family member with a permanent disability. So, tell me, which handheld weapon would you rather have in that situation? A gun, which requires you to hit a smaller target, that might not take down the intruder, that might provoke retaliation, that could kill or permanently disable a family member? Or would you rather have the item that's instantly effective, eliminates the chance of retaliation, and even if it's fired at the wrong person, wouldn't kill or permanently harm them? The answer, of course, is clear. It's undeniable. But maybe home protection isn't the only kind of protection you seek. Let's look at another common scenario, one we haven't addressed yet, but one that often provokes the purchase of a gun, but one that's often the reason why people get guns to begin with. Let's look at scenario 2, an assault in public. You're walking down the street, it's night again, and you're alone. Half of the street lights are out, and the other half are throwing house-sized shadows behind every car. It's kind of spooky. The cars are all parked, all dark. It's 10 p.m. or 2 a.m., it doesn't matter. It's just the street is empty. No traffic, no pedestrians, no stores, no open restaurants. There's nowhere to go but where you're going, or where you're leaving, when you spot a figure on the other side of the street, on the other sidewalk. And that figure spots you. You're both shadows, but this shadow crosses now to your side. They make a beeline towards you, purposefully, suddenly, and fast. What do? You reach down, you grip your gun. If it's a real assailant, you have a few choices to make. Do you hold the gun out in the dim slant of a street light and hope the sight of it sends a message? Do you need to fire off a warning shot to prove you're serious? Or do you shoot at the assailant? You have to decide. Is it bright enough for the gun to be seen? Is the threat serious enough to fire the gun in warning? Or would that be too serious? Will it wake the neighborhood? Turn this into a crime scene all on its own? If you shoot in warning, where do you shoot? Do you shoot up at the sky? Are there buildings up there that you could hit? People in those windows? If you look at where you're pointing the gun for your warning shot, you're not looking at the assailant. You're taking your eyes off the threat, and that's a bad idea. Both seem like a bad idea. Firing without looking and looking away while you fire away from your assailant. But what if you fired at the assailant? That would send all the message in the world. But would you be justified in it? Would the crime scene investigators, with the flashing lights and evidence bags, would it all agree with you? That this shadow, this person walking fast toward you, that they were a threat? Or would you be arrested on the spot? If you really wanted to incapacitate the assailant, you'd have to shoot him in the chest or in the head. If you only injured him, he could still hurt you. Or he could just cry and scream in pain. Would you be the one to call 911? Or would you run? But if you killed him, what would you do then? With a hot body on the pavement and the ring of gunfire in your ear and blood maybe running down the sidewalk, your life, your world for at least the next year would be irrevocably changed. You wouldn't be to work on Monday. You wouldn't be to work maybe ever. So maybe you just stand there then. You hope for the assailant to resolve into focus, for your gun to be seen and the moment to pass. You grip the handle tight, waiting, afraid of every outcome. And he gets closer and closer. What do you do? But let's rewind. You're still walking down the street at night alone. Nowhere to run, and a figure crosses towards you, moving fast, purposefully, aiming unmistakably, it seems, for you. You reach down and you grip your pepper gun. This is a pepper gun. It looks like a regular gun. Because it's non-lethal, it's ready to be used in more situations, and with less hesitation. Forget those little hand bottles of pepper spray. Pepper guns fire a blinding stream of chemicals at an assailant. Fast and as far as 20 feet away. Pepper guns are filled with chemicals. I have a hard time pronouncing it. Oleoresin capsicum, and a propellant like nitrogen. Aimed at the face, the chemicals are an inflammatory agent. Since it's a spray, it disperses out from the gun in a wider cone than a bullet, making everything that hits the face hit the eyes. Miss the first time? Pull the trigger again, or again, or again. Keep trying as long as it takes. Each canister in the gun provides 10 shots to ensure you nail your target. If you need more canisters, you can use them. They're small and light, easy to carry, and easy to reload. The moment the chemicals hit the assailant's eyes and nose, they go to work. Eyelids slam shut. The nose and throat fill with mucus. Breathing gets so difficult that the assailant bowls over, falling to his knees. But the chemicals don't just work on the eyelids. They're so potent that they dilate the capillaries of the eyes themselves. So even if he manages to get his eyes open, he can't see a thing. Temporary blindness and a kind of burning, bubbling pain persist for 20 to 40 minutes. Pepper guns are so effective, they're used by police and the military, and they work against rabid dogs, even bears. Oh, and rather than costing $500 like a handgun, they cost just $50. You can get them on Amazon. You can have them shipped to your house. What does the decision tree look like when you have a pepper gun in your bag? Well, it's a lot simpler. The first option, intimidation, is still there. Pepper guns come in a variety of colors, so if you have a black one, it looks kind of like a gun. Maybe then the sight of it and the shout of a warning is enough. But if the assailant can't see it, or keeps coming towards you, Forget about the warning shot. These guns don't make the noise a bullet would make, so a warning shot's out of the question. What's next then, if the assailant keeps approaching? Well, with the real gun, remember, you had two choices at that point. You could wait to make sure the assailant really was a threat, but at that point, the assailant might have overtaken you. Or you can fire at the assailant, right? Remember with the gun? You could fire somewhere lethal, in the head or the chest, or somewhere not lethal. Fire and hope for the best. Hope that you're not making a terrible life-altering mistake. But with the pepper gun, the choice is easy. If a threat is approaching, you pull the trigger. You fire right at the face. Temporary blindness, searing pain, and coughing, all of it knocks the assailant down and gives you time to escape. At least 20 minutes of blindness on their part. Pepper guns are 100% painful and 100% blinding when they strike the eyes. Nobody can fight through it, not even a bear. But they're also 100% non-toxic, with no lifelong side effects. Why? Because the chemicals inside are essentially concentrated acid from hot peppers. Natural agents that neutralize threats without killing or permanently harming them. Weapons without paperwork, without regret. Just think, after you fire at the assailant, you don't have to worry about the crime scene, because the only crime committed was by the assailant. There's no blood on the pavement, no interrogation of your motives, no crying family members. In all likelihood, you can just go home and tell the cops on the phone what happened. Your life isn't turned upside down. You can turn instead back to your life. You can make it to work on Monday and the day after that, and put the incident behind you. Yes, when it comes to neutralizing threats, whether the threat of someone entering your home or the threat of someone assaulting you on the pavement, these more modern weapons are not only clear and compelling alternatives, they are quite simply better ones. But don't just take my word for it. Take the Supreme Court's word. That's right. In March of 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed for the first time that tasers and pepper guns are protected under the Second Amendment, just like traditional guns. So don't think that by getting one of these tools, you're somehow getting something less than a firearm. Under the law, these weapons are protected just the same. And as the Supreme Court said, they could actually prove more effective. In fact, here's what they wrote, quote, "A weapon is an effective means of self-defense only if one is prepared to use it. Countless people may have reservations about using deadly force, whether for moral, religious, or emotional reasons, or simply out of fear of killing the wrong person." And they went on, they said, "I am not prepared to say that a state may force an individual to choose between exercising that right, to bear arms, and following her conscience, at least where both can be accommodated by a non-lethal weapon, already in widespread use across the nation." How widespread? More than 200,000 people have tasers and stun guns and are not afraid to use them. And even more have pepper guns. Because when combined with a home security system, these personal security measures provide a far better measure of protection for you and your family. Tasers and pepper guns mean the same or better personal security without the threat of death, injury, or accident. They mean the same or better personal security without the chance for lethal domestic abuse. Yeah, that spike for women in the gun deaths chart that we looked at before, that's gone. Tasers and pepper guns mean the same or better personal security without the chance for a family member or a family friend stealing and using it against their coworkers, or their fellow students at a school, or their fellow citizens on the street. And most powerfully, tasers and pepper guns mean the same or better personal security without the chance for suicide. And I can't stress this enough. If everyone who had a firearm today had instead a just as effective, non-lethal weapon, a taser or a pepper gun, we could reduce the 21,000 firearm suicides in this country down to zero. I'm not assuming these people won't be suicidal. No, they may still have suicidal thoughts and take action on those thoughts. But they take action with less lethal tools at their disposal. So they'd have the same suicide completion rate as the rest of the population. When someone tries to attempt suicide with a gun, it results in a death 83% of the time. When someone tries to attempt suicide by other means, it results in a death 2% of the time. 2 versus 83%. Guns are literally more than 40 times as likely to result in a death. So what does that mean for the 24,606 people who attempt suicide each year with a gun? Well, if they use a gun, that means that 21,000 of them will die. But if they didn't have a gun, if instead they used a non-lethal self-defense weapon, those 24,606 suicide attempts would result in just 492 deaths. Compare that. Today's world with guns, 21,000 suicide deaths. A world with non-lethal alternatives to guns, 492 deaths. So, to be clear, if we replaced every gun with a non-lethal weapon, we wouldn't prevent all 21,000 deaths. But we would prevent 20,508 of them. And most who survive an attempt, the majority in fact, don't go on to try again. Looking for security, for a way to protect yourself and your family? I understand. Install a home security system. Looking for a way to stop an intruder or an assailant in their tracks? Get a non-lethal personal weapon. If protection is all you're looking for, how could you possibly choose anything else? If we want to prevent deaths by guns, the best thing we can do is not to put light restrictions on them. The best thing we can do is to outcompete them. Don't tell people they can't protect themselves. Show them ways they can protect themselves better with these proven alternatives. For every person who wants to buy a gun, if we can convince them to do one of these things instead, we can take one more step towards reducing violence. Every 36 people we convince to use an alternative to a gun, we stop a firearm assault. Every 87 people we convince to use an alternative, we stop a gun suicide. Every 149 people we convince, we stop someone from being accidentally shot. Every 154 people we convince to use an alternative to a gun, we stop someone from committing a gun murder. And every 3,333 people we convince to use an alternative to a gun, we stop someone from being accidentally killed. How do we make the case? Here are 5 ways. First, we can encourage new home builders to make security systems a standard feature, one as ubiquitous as door locks. Today, security is an addition, one that the homeowner or tenant has to want in order to get. But what if security wasn't an afterthought or an add-on? What if it was built into the design? If it was there by default? There are several things that could be done. Beyond the standard sensors at every window and door, you could place windows at a higher elevation, install shrubs at the base of entry and exit points, and reinforce both windows and doors without making them look tacky or out of place like with the bars on the windows. You build alarm and motion-activated floodlights flush into the sides of awnings and cornices. Yes, just as security has become a standard feature on cars, and biometrics a standard on phones, whether with your fingerprint or your face recognition, we could begin to build security and safety features standard into our homes. By what mechanism? Why would this happen? Well, laws could be passed requiring it, sure, just as laws are passed for building codes requiring homes in Florida to sustain wind damage, for example, or requiring houses in California to be able to sustain earthquakes. But beyond laws, local neighborhoods and planned communities could build home security directly into their planning. If not laws or localities, home builders themselves could recognize security as a selling point, and perhaps they're afraid to do so, thinking that to even suggest the need for security is to concede that the home is vulnerable and maybe located in a vulnerable neighborhood. But this kind of thinking's folly. Security isn't just something that people seek when they fear what's outside. It's something that people seek when they value what's inside. If you're a home builder, building homes to house the values inside, providing security, should be as second nature as providing shelter, providing a roof over people's heads. I mean, that's what you're selling. They're in many ways one and the same thing. And if all these mechanisms fail, home buyers can demand it themselves. demand that their homes protect them rather than they protecting their homes. After all, nobody ever built a fortress to protect the fortress. The fortress itself is the protection. Home buyers and renters can be clear about what they need and picky about what they choose. Real estate magazines and newspaper sections can take up the cause, and why shouldn't they? Fear sells. I can hear the local TV news reporter already. Could your home be vulnerable to attack? Don't miss the shocking report tonight at 11. So that's way number one. I said I had 5 ways. So here's the second way. Get home security and non-lethal weapon makers to work together. After all, people who buy a security system may still want to feel the added sense of security of a weapon in the hand. And the people who want to carry a personal weapon out on the town probably want protection from harm at home too. By working together, these two industries could target the gun market for profits. And there are serious profits to be had. Current gun protection buyers tend to spend far more on firearms than the average customer spends on home security, or non-lethal weapons. Why not take some of that market? Why not directly compete with firearms? Imagine a cheap and effective bundled security package. Maybe it comes with an ecosystem of non-lethal weapons, a taser in the bedroom, a stun gun in the kitchen, and 3 to 4 pepper guns for being out and about, to put in your bag or to put in the car. The brand message could be so strong: maximize safety, minimize threats for a fraction of the cost, and without the worry. I can see the brochure already. The ad or the brand message, the TV commercial. But don't just take the industry's word for it. Our third way to promote competing alternatives is to create an association of former gun owners who are security converts. People who used to keep a gun in their home or on their belt, but have now thought better of it. This could attract people of all stripes, from those who have lost a loved one to gun accidents, to those who accidentally shot themselves in the foot. Yes, maybe some of our YouTube friends can turn views into action. Just imagine if these videos of people shooting themselves in the foot ended with an alternative message for a better security alternative. What could such an association do? They could make the case for safety and security in a more personal way, without people questioning their motives. They could hold rallies, they could partner with cities and municipalities, take out booths in county fairs, pass out brochures, make commercials, sit in on roundtables like on the Sunday morning political shows, and go on the speaking circuit. Oh, and they could recruit new members. Maybe they could even offer discounts or subscriptions to home security offerings. They could print member magazines, organize member activities and retreats, really create something that advances the science of security at home and in the public in a safe way. Yes, they could commission studies, host conferences, and promote best practices. They could become not the anti-NRA, but the alternate NRA. Call them the Personal Security Association, PSA, a kind of real-life PSA, sending a public service announcement to all who seek security and personal protection. There's something better out there, something safer out there, and we'll prove it. And for those who are no longer on the fence, for the 50 million US adults who already own guns for security, what do we do for them? How do we reach them? Well, the association will surely have an impact, but we can make it easier. And that takes us to the fourth way to promote alternatives: offering trade-in programs to gun owners who want to trade the danger of guns for the safety of home security and non-lethal weapons. This should be a one-for-one trade. You trade an ineffective and dangerous gun for an effective and safe alternative at no cost at all, not a penny. Because guns are usually more expensive than these alternatives, it shouldn't be a hard trade, except for the question of what to do with all the guns traded in. The best option, of course, would be to remove the guns from the market. Fewer guns reduces the chance for accident and death. When Australia had its gun buyback program, many of the guns were simply destroyed. But there are other options. For example, if it's the association we talked about administering the trade, maybe they could work to sell the guns to the military. So what's the solution to guns for those who seek protection and safety? To provide a better alternative, to convince them that there is something better already out there. Security systems are better at protecting homes and buildings than guns. Every business out there already knows it. And non-lethal weapons are better at stopping assailants than guns. Police units already know this. And all we have to do is make the case clear, make the solution compelling, and make it easy for people to choose something that is not only better for them and their family, but better for everyone. That's great and all, sure, but what about people who own guns for something other than protection? For hunting or, for sport? What about people who don't give a damn about protection, but just enjoy guns? Well, I think we can find an answer in the same way. Don't ban it, better it. If we can show a better alternative, we don't need to force it. So what's a better alternative for sport owners? How about this?